Hello, how's it going? Hope you're having a good day. And if you've been around my channel long enough, you probably started to realize that I really like coffee. And not only that, but like making coffee B-roll, coffee sequences, just videos of coffee really. So when I got the opportunity to make a commercial for a cafe, I got super excited and I knew I just had to do it. So here's that commercial.
Because it don't get better than this. No, it don't get better than this. It don't get better than this. No, it don't get better than this. No, it don't get
So before we get into the behind the scenes stuff, I just want to show you some of the pre-production that I did. All I did was literally create a small checklist of shots that I wanted to get. This helped for two reasons. Firstly, it helped me plan out the transitions that I wanted to get so that everything flowed and the transitions would work. And also to visually craft the story even before I got there. I didn't follow it exactly, but it was a good guideline when shooting because it allowed me to get all the shots that I needed to successfully tell the story of making a coffee. So I shot this entire sequence at 1080p and 100 frames per second because that's the best slow motion setting that my camera goes to. Because we're shooting in slow motion and the cafe is quite dark, we had to add quite a lot of light, so we used the Aperture 300D Mark II. The first shot of the sequence probably took the longest to get just because of the amount of tries that we had to do. This shot was inspired by Daniel Schiffer. Well, I mean, kind of this whole shoot style is, but this shot in particular definitely was. Basically, all I did was set up a tripod and have the camera facing down. Check out my last video to see how to actually set this up. I set the focus to the closest focusing distance and then just tossed a handful of coffee beans up towards the lens and let them fall and pulled my hand back out of the frame as quickly as possible. And then in the editing process, I slowed it down to about 20%, which is slightly slower than 100 frames per second allows, so I had to add some optical flow as well. I then also reversed it so that it looks like the coffee beans are going up and then back down. And that transitioned nicely into the second shot where the coffee beans are also going down. The second shot was quite simple. Natalie just held a bunch of coffee beans above the coffee machine and I tracked the coffee beans down into the coffee machine. I held my shot a little further past where you can see the beans going into the coffee machine just so that it can help transition into the next shot even better. This is where the quick planning the night before comes in handy because I knew exactly what the next shot was going to be, so I knew how to transition into that, keeping that same flow going downwards. So yeah, the next shot continued tracking down and I just tracked down past the coffee machine. I went a little slower this time because I didn't want as much motion blur on the coffee machine, as the coffee machine isn't actually moving, so it would look weird if it had motion blur on it. This makes it a little harder because the slower you move the camera, the more pronounced the camera shake gets. But after adding some speed ramps in post, it wasn't really too noticeable. I then continued the downward motion to show the grinded coffee going into the coffee machine thingy. What is that thing called? Coffee machine thingy. The portafilter. So as the grinded coffee passes into the portafilter, I followed it down just to continue that downward motion. I also started the shot out of focus, and then as I pulled it back, it would go into focus just to add to that effect and make the transition quite a bit smoother. The next shot was just a simple dolly forward as Natalie wiped the side of the portafilter. A quick tip to get smooth dolly shots is to put a cloth or a towel underneath the camera and use that to help slide the camera forwards. Now we moved on to the actual coffee machine, and because it was a little further away from the light, we had to reposition the light inside the bar area. This next shot was just a quick one, but it definitely helps with adding some dynamism into the video. If you track the movement of your subject with your camera, it's going to make the clip more interesting. And because it was just a quick shot, I thought adding the movement could also make it more interesting too. So for the next shot, I decided to dolly backwards while Natalie puts the cup into place. I did this for two reasons. Firstly, we don't want to see the camera's reflection in the mirrored surface of the coffee machine. And secondly, I also thought the leading lines of that like drain or like grill, the bottom of the coffee machine, it looked really good and it was leading towards the coffee cup, which also has the logo of the cafe on it. So I thought that was really interesting, having those leading lines towards the logo of that cafe. I kept this next shot quite simple just because I didn't want to make too many coffees and mess up and have to make another one So we just kept it really simple and got it in the first take, but I still think it was quite interesting just because of the panning to the side movement. So for the shot, I actually slowed it down quite a bit and reversed it, but it's really unnoticeable, and I think it worked out quite well. I love how it looks and how it sounds when the steam comes out of the frother, and even though they don't usually leave it on this long when they make a cup of coffee, we still kept it for the cinematic value, and I think it worked out quite well. So I think this is a great time to mention that this process that we went through when we were creating the sequence, it's not the exact process that they go through to create a cup of coffee, and you don't actually have to follow what they actually do. We took things out and added things in just to try and increase the cinematic value and make it more interesting. You don't always have to include every little step that you take, and I think that's where the creativity comes in. You can decide which parts of the coffee making process you want to include and which parts you don't, and then think of cool angles and cool shots to capture those moments. And then for this next shot of the silver cup tracking into the frother, it's just cinematic to follow your subject, so we did that again. So these two shots were filmed one after the other in one milk frothing attempt. But I still think it turned out quite well, and that just shows you can keep things simple and still make an interesting sequence. And that's the same with the pouring of the milk into the coffee. We have to get them almost at first try. One thing I did was again to follow the movement of how Natalie was pouring the milk into the coffee, kind of like having that rotation effect. And for the final shot, I put the camera on the cloth again and pulled back from the cup into focus. I also got Natalie to walk past the light just as I was pulling back, so the light on the side of the cup also matches the movement of the camera. It's a really small detail, but it's little details like this that really help sell the shot. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked the video. If you did, please leave a like, maybe comment what your favorite shot was, and subscribe too. And I'll leave you with a final video, once just with the sound effects, and second with the sound effects and the music. See ya.